Jim Davidson was a young, attractive guy who had been involved in sports since childhood and drew attention with his looks and confidence. His popularity with girls began to manifest in his teenage years when he realized how his appearance and charm could influence people. His childhood wasn't easy. Jim lost his mother when he was only 10 years old, which had a profound impact on his future life. His father, wanting to instill discipline in his son, introduced him to sports at an early age. This not only helped Jim develop physically, but also shaped his character. Jim grew into a determined and confident young man who wasn't afraid to go after what he wanted. Over time, Jim began to realize that his charisma and attractiveness could be tools to get what he desired. This made him not only self-assured, but also somewhat overconfident. He was used to attention from women and quickly learned how to use it to his advantage. Late in the evening on October 12, 2014, in Dallas, Texas, a police dispatcher received an emergency call reporting a murder at a local gym. A patrol car was immediately dispatched to the scene. The police arrived at the gym and discovered the body of 19-year-old fitness trainer Jim Davidson. The caller was a woman who could barely speak or explain why she was at the gym at that hour. Upon arrival, the police cordoned off the area and began a thorough investigation of the scene. Initially, it appeared to be an accident, but a detailed examination quickly dispelled that theory. Jim's body lay on the floor, surrounded by scattered gym equipment. The officers immediately noticed that the head injury indicated he had been struck with a heavy object from behind, ruling out the possibility of an accidental death. The police meticulously examined the gym, collecting evidence and photographing every detail. The fact that the gym was a public space complicated the investigation. There were numerous footprints on the floor, making it difficult to identify potential suspects. Many people had come and gone throughout the day, which complicated the gathering of evidence. However, important clues were found at the scene, such as blood traces and fingerprints on the gym equipment, which could aid further investigation. The police also began reviewing surveillance footage to determine who had been at the gym the night before Jim's body was discovered. The footage could potentially provide the key to understanding what had happened. Despite the challenges posed by the public nature of the gym, the investigators remained hopeful of finding the culprit, knowing that every small detail could be crucial. The investigation was just beginning. From a young age, Jim realized he was attracted to older women. This could have been connected to the loss of his mother and his search for emotional support from women who reminded him of maternal care. When he started working at the gym, it became clear to him that many of his clients were lonely women who craved attention. He easily found common ground with these women, which created favorable conditions for developing deeper but secret relationships. These women saw in him a young and energetic man, while Jim felt a sense of power over them, enjoying the attention they lavished upon him. Jim Davidson began maintaining relationships with 3 older women, Linda, Sarah, and Susan. Each of these women, with her own unique story, had experienced loneliness and a lack of attention, often accompanying the aging process. Their romantic relationships with the young and energetic Jim gave them a renewed sense of life and allowed them to feel needed and attractive once again. Linda was the first woman with whom Jim started a relationship. She was 66 years old, and her life had become unbearably lonely after her husband's death. Linda felt that, along with her husband's passing, the joy and meaning of her life had vanished. She had lost her zest for life and often felt unnecessary. For many elderly people, this feeling becomes a constant companion, and Linda was no exception. Regular visits to the gym became not only a way for her to maintain physical health, but also an opportunity to escape the monotonous days filled with silence and memories. When she met Jim at the beginning of 2014, something new appeared in her life that brought back long-forgotten emotions. Jim became a beacon of light for her. He was attentive and always ready to listen to her stories of the past. Linda began to feel important and interesting again. Their relationship started with simple conversations after workouts, but soon these meetings became an essential part of her life. By March 2014, their relationship had reached a new level, and Linda once again felt what it was like to be loved. Together with Jim, she rediscovered the joy of life's little moments: walks in the park, lunches at cafes, and simply the feeling of closeness with someone who made her heart race. For Linda, this was not just a physical attraction, but a true emotional rescue. Jim brought her back to life, making her believe that age wasn't the end of romance, just a new chapter of it. Sarah was 64 years old and had also lost her husband a few years earlier. However, unlike Linda, Sarah didn't allow loneliness to completely consume her life. She was a strong and independent woman, but deep down, she too felt an emptiness. Sarah had long been deprived of attention and compliments that could confirm her femininity, especially in recent years following her husband's death. Like many older women, she found it hard to accept the changes of aging and the societal stereotypes that often deny older people the right to love and romance. In March 2014, she met Jim at the gym, and this encounter turned her world upside down. Unlike Linda, Sarah didn't hide her interest in the young trainer. From the very beginning of their communication, she made it clear that she saw him not only as a trainer, but as an attractive man who reignited her youthful fire. Sarah began to feel desirable and attractive once again. Jim, with his energy and attention, gave her the emotions she had been missing for so long. For her, it was like a return to the past, to a time when she felt in her prime. Her meetings with Jim, their dinners, walks, and the gifts she gave him, all of this restored her confidence and brought joy back into her life. For Sarah, this relationship wasn't just a romantic adventure. Jim became a source of life energy, reminding her that she could still be wanted and loved. Their bond provided her not only with physical but also emotional satisfaction, bringing back the confidence and joy she had lost. Susan, the youngest of the three women, was 61 years old and going through a tough period after a recent divorce. Her marriage had lasted over 30 years, but it eventually fell apart, leaving her deeply disappointed. Susan felt betrayed and lost, with her self-esteem at rock bottom. She started going to the gym in April 2014, not so much to improve her physical shape, but to cope with her inner pain. Unlike Linda and Sarah, Susan was more reserved and cautious in relationships. She wasn't looking for new love, but her meetings with Jim, his care, and his attention became a source of comfort for her. Initially, their relationship was limited to friendly conversations, during which Jim helped her deal with the aftermath of her divorce. But over time, her feelings for him grew. Jim became not just a young trainer, but someone who reignited the spark of joy and the desire to live within her. He listened to her attentively, gave her advice, and supported her, helping Susan feel better. Their relationship developed slowly, but by May they had grown closer. Susan once again felt that she could be attractive and that her age didn't deprive her of the right to love and care. For Susan, Jim became a source of not only physical closeness, but also emotional support. He restored her confidence and joy, which she had lost after the divorce. Thanks to this relationship, Susan was able to overcome her fears and begin living a full life again. Each of these women believed that Jim was with her and her alone. Linda, Sarah, and Susan found in him what they had lost in their lives. Linda found emotional salvation from loneliness. Sarah rediscovered confidence and femininity, and Susan found comfort and support after her divorce. To all of them, Jim became something more than just a young man. He was a symbol of new life, a bright light that restored the emotions they had long lost. Jim, in turn, found great satisfaction in realizing his importance in the lives of these women. He understood how much they meant to him, and this gave him a sense of power and control. He enjoyed his secret life, knowing that each of these women was willing to do anything to keep him close. For Jim, this was not just physical attraction, but a game that gave him a sense of strength and significance. However, his game was dangerous. The deeper he got involved in these relationships, the harder it became to hide the truth. All three women believed they were the only ones in Jim's life, and this made his secret life even more tense. By July 2014, Jim's relationships with Linda, Sarah, and Susan began to spiral out of control. Each woman became more emotionally dependent on him, diving deeper into their feelings. What initially seemed like an exciting game to Jim turned into a heavy burden. Their desires and demands grew stronger, and it became increasingly difficult to hide his parallel relationships. Linda was the first to show signs of growing attachment to Jim. She increasingly wondered how their relationship might develop. In her eyes, Jim was not just a young lover. She saw in him the possibility of a new life. Jim was the one who brought her back to life after years of loneliness, and she wanted to spend more and more time with him. Her meetings with Jim became more frequent and emotional. She started dreaming about how they could spend more time together and even considered moving closer to him. Her thoughts were focused on the future, with Jim playing the central role. Linda became more persistent in trying to convince Jim that their relationship was special and that they could build something more together. Her emotional dependence grew with each passing day, and it began to manifest in obsessive behavior. Linda called and texted Jim more often, trying to keep his attention. She grew anxious if he didn't respond immediately, beginning to think something was wrong. For her, this relationship wasn't just a romance, it was her chance at a new beginning. While Linda was lost in her dreams of the future, Sarah began to show signs of jealousy and a desire to control Jim. Unlike Linda, Sarah had always been more decisive and confident in herself. She was used to managing her life and achieving what she wanted. But her relationship with Jim started to make her feel uneasy. She noticed that Jim was canceling or skipping their meetings more frequently, often without explanation. This worried Sarah. She couldn't understand why Jim was becoming so distant. In her mind, suspicions began to form that he might be seeing someone else. Though she refused to believe it, her jealousy gradually turned into obsessive behavior. She began demanding more of Jim's time and attention. Sarah regularly showered him with expensive gifts, such as wristwatches, sports equipment, and clothes, hoping this would keep his focus on her. She believed that by showing generosity and care, she could hold on to him. But despite her efforts, Jim remained elusive and grew even more distant. The more Sarah tried to maintain control over their relationship, the stronger her jealousy became. She started noticing every little detail. If Jim didn't respond to her messages or declined to meet, it filled her with anxiety and suspicion. Sarah began to feel the threat of losing him, and her behavior became increasingly obsessive. She didn't know that her suspicions were justified and that Jim was indeed involved with other women. Meanwhile, Susan, the most reserved of the three women, began to grow more emotionally dependent on Jim. She was the last to enter into a relationship with him, and the emotional wounds from her divorce had yet to heal. Jim became more than just a romantic partner for her. He was a source of emotional support and stability. Susan enjoyed their private, intimate meetings. Unlike Linda and Sarah, she preferred quieter, more discreet encounters, away from prying eyes. Her attachment to Jim grew with each passing day. He became the person who restored her confidence and allowed her to believe that she could be loved again. However, her dependence began to manifest in severe anxiety. She grew increasingly afraid of losing Jim, especially when he started canceling their meetings or not answering her calls. Susan knew that their relationship had to remain secret, but her fears became more real. She started to suspect that Jim wasn't as interested in their relationship as she was, and this caused her deep pain. For Susan, this relationship became the meaning of her life. She couldn't afford to lose Jim, as that would mean returning to the loneliness she so feared. Her emotional dependence on Jim reached its peak, and she became increasingly worried that she might lose him forever. Jim, on the other hand, relished the attention and was aware of his power over all three women. He was used to their dependence on him and their efforts to keep him at any cost. But over time, he began to feel that managing these relationships was becoming increasingly difficult. Each woman wanted more time with him, more attention, and more love. Linda grew more obsessive and emotionally unstable, Sarah more jealous and demanding, and Susan more anxious and dependent. Jim struggled to maintain balance, but he understood that the situation was becoming too tense. Each meeting with these women required more and more effort to hide his connections with the others. And although he enjoyed the game, realizing his power, he couldn't foresee that the game would soon end in catastrophe. Life can be surprising, bringing people together in the most unexpected places. Linda and Sarah met one day by chance in a local library. Both women loved to read and often visited the library to escape loneliness and immerse themselves in the world of books. That day, they happened to sit near each other, both reading novels, and after striking up a casual conversation about literature, they unexpectedly discovered that they had much in common. From the first minute of their conversation, a special bond formed between them. Linda and Sarah were the kind of women who had lived long, experience-filled lives. Both had lost their husbands and had faced loneliness. In their conversations, they willingly shared their experiences, thoughts about life, and how they had managed to overcome the most difficult moments. It turned out that they both had joined the gym for the same reason, to try to find joy in life again after their painful losses. Sometimes, Linda said, I feel like life stopped after my husband passed away. The gym became my salvation, a way to start doing something again. Oh, I understand you like no one else, Sarah replied eagerly. The gym became the place where I felt alive again. We women need to take care of ourselves, despite everything that's happened to us. The women laughed a lot, reminisced about the past, and shared their feelings. Their conversations became regular, and soon they began meeting in cafes, discussing everything from favorite books to the challenges of life after loss. Their friendship helped each find support and understanding. One evening, when they met for coffee in a cozy cafe, Linda suddenly decided to share a secret with Sarah that she had been keeping for a long time. Smiling with slight embarrassment, she began, You know, Sarah, I have a date tonight with a young man. Sarah raised her eyebrows in surprise, but noticing her friend's embarrassment, she smiled warmly. Really? Tell me more. Linda looked excited, her eyes sparkling with anticipation. Yes, he's not just any young man. He's our local gym trainer. Jim, we've been seeing each other for several months now. He made me feel young again, and I don't even know how to explain it. I feel like I've come alive with him. At that moment, Sarah's expression changed. Her heart sank, and she almost lost consciousness at what she had just heard. Jim, the same Jim with whom she herself had been seeing for several months. Thoughts raced through Sarah's mind, but she tried to hide her shock. Composing herself, she carefully asked, Are you talking about Jim Davidson, the trainer? Yes, him, Linda confirmed excitedly, not noticing the tension rising in Sarah's eyes. Sarah took a deep breath, realizing it was time to tell the truth. Linda, I need to tell you something. She paused, trying to find the right words. Jim isn't just seeing you. I'm also seeing him. In the silence that followed, Linda could barely believe what she had just heard. She struggled to process that her friend was involved with the same man she thought was her lover. Linda's eyes widened as she grasped the reality of the situation. You too? Linda whispered, her voice trembling with a mix of surprise and hurt. Sarah nodded, carefully watching her friend's reaction. Yes, she replied, and I'm in the same situation as you. I thought I was the only one, but it seems we were both mistaken. They fell into silence, trying to digest the revelation. The anger toward Jim and the feeling of betrayal grew stronger with each passing second. But despite the shock and disappointment, their life experience helped them avoid reacting impulsively. Linda and Sarah weren't just adults. They were seasoned women who knew that revenge or an emotional outburst wouldn't solve the problem. Instead, they decided to take a step back and think about what to do next. They now had a shared goal, to teach Jim a life lesson. We shouldn't let him know that we're aware, Sarah suggested. Let him think everything's as it was, and when the time is right, we'll show him that he can't treat women like this. Linda nodded, agreeing with her friend. Yes, she said with resolve in her voice. We'll make him understand that playing with other people's emotions has consequences. He thinks we're just toys in his hands, but he has no idea what we're capable of. Sarah smiled, feeling supported by Linda. They both knew that it was best to wait for the right moment to confront Jim. Instead of revealing their cards too soon, they decided to keep him in the dark and plan the day when they would end his game together. We have plenty of time, Sarah concluded, raising her coffee cup. Let's just wait until the perfect moment. Linda raised her cup as well, winking at her friend. Let him enjoy his game while he can, and we'll enjoy ours. They clinked their cups, exchanging knowing looks. Now they weren't just friends. They were allies, united in planning their revenge. Once, Linda decided to surprise him by visiting the gym after it had closed. She wanted to talk to him in person and perhaps spend some time together. In recent weeks, Jim had started canceling their meetings more frequently, which worried Linda. Her intuition told her something wasn't right, and she wanted to clear things up. When Linda arrived at the gym, it was already closed, but the lights were still on inside. This surprised her, as Jim often stayed late to clean up. But this time, something felt off. She quietly entered the gym, hoping to find Jim alone, as usual. However, what she saw instantly changed everything. Among the workout equipment, she spotted Jim with another woman. It was Susan. That moment shocked Linda. She immediately realized that she and Sarah were not the only women Jim had deceived. Now everything was clear. Jim wasn't just playing with Linda and Sarah's emotions. He was a cunning manipulator, using all of them. Rage surged through Linda so strongly that she barely restrained herself from storming into the gym and unleashing her fury on Jim. Her heart pounded with adrenaline, but she knew acting on emotion wasn't the best course. Taking a deep breath, Linda quietly left the gym, deciding that it would be better to confront him the next day when she could calmly demand an explanation. The next day, late in the evening, Linda returned to the gym to talk to Jim about what had happened. She came with the intent to get to the bottom of everything. With cold determination, she demanded an explanation. Jim, seeing her firmness, realized that there was no point in hiding the truth any longer. He admitted that he had been involved not only with her and Sarah, but also with other women. He explained that all these relationships were superficial and that he had never taken them seriously. These words were the last straw for Linda. She had no more doubts. Jim was a scoundrel who had used all of them for his selfish pleasure. The insult and betrayal ignited even more anger within Linda. She could feel the fire building inside her, though outwardly she remained calm. Linda began to confront him with accusations. She berated Jim for using her and the other women, toying with their emotions. Jim, as always, remained cold and indifferent, brushing off her words without the slightest sign of remorse. He believed he had everything under control and thought Linda wouldn't be able to do anything against him. Linda was serious this time. The more Jim dismissed her accusations and made condescending remarks, the angrier she became. In a moment of emotional intensity, as Jim focused on removing weights from a barbell and ignoring her, Linda noticed a dumbbell lying nearby. Consumed by rage and a sense of betrayal, she grabbed it and, without thinking, struck Jim on the head. The consequences were immediate. Jim collapsed to the floor, unconscious. Linda froze, realizing what she had just done. She stood still, staring at Jim's lifeless body, unable to comprehend the gravity of her actions. It was too late. Jim was dead. The blow from the dumbbell had killed him instantly, and Linda, now aware that a young man's life had ended because of her, sank into a state of shock. Her hands trembled and the dumbbell slipped from her fingers, landing on the floor with a dull thud. Her heart raced as the reality of what had happened slowly but relentlessly plunged her into panic. Thoughts of escape didn't even cross her mind. Linda knew she had to cover her tracks first. In a panic, she grabbed her phone and called Sarah with a trembling voice. Struggling to hold back sobs, Linda told her what had happened. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Sarah quickly arrived at the gym. When Sarah arrived, they immediately got to work without saying much. Trying to stay calm, the two women began cleaning up the evidence. They hid the dumbbell and carefully wiped down every surface to remove any fingerprints or traces of blood. Meticulously inspecting every detail, they ensured that nothing could link them to the crime. Once the cleanup was finished, the gym fell silent again, as if nothing had happened. Linda and Sarah left the crime scene, trying to behave normally, leaving Jim's body and the hidden truth behind. But they both knew their secret couldn't remain buried forever. Half an hour after Linda and Sarah had left the gym, Susan arrived, completely unaware of what had transpired. She had come to meet Jim, as she often did late at night when the gym was already closed and no one else was around. But what she saw left her completely stunned. Jim's body lay on the floor, with a pool of blood beneath him. Susan froze, unable to process what she was seeing. Her mind refused to accept the horrifying scene before her eyes. For several minutes, she stood there, paralyzed by shock, not knowing what to do. But slowly, her ability to think returned. With trembling hands, she pulled out her phone and, barely managing to dial 911, explained the situation to the operator. Within minutes, medics and police arrived at the scene. The medical team confirmed that Jim was dead, and the police immediately cordoned off the area and began searching for evidence. However, the investigation was complicated by the fact that the gym was a public space with numerous fingerprints and tracks from various people. Additionally, the gym had recently been cleaned, making the investigators' job even harder. Nevertheless, this didn't stop the police. They began questioning Susan, but she was still in such a state of shock that she couldn't provide clear answers. Realizing she was unable to help, the investigators asked her to come to the police station the next day for further questioning. The next morning, the official investigation began. The police carefully collected all the possible evidence that could shed light on what had happened. They started interviewing the gym staff, visitors, and people who were close to Jim. Among those scheduled for questioning were Linda, Sarah, and Susan. At this stage, Susan was the prime suspect. She was the last person to have seen the body and couldn't explain why she was at the gym at that time. The police intended to get more detailed statements from her, as her behavior seemed suspicious. However, the investigation was far from over, and the real truth was just beginning to surface. The investigation into Jim's death continued, and despite all the difficulties, the police did not give up. The gym, as a public space with many footprints and traces, made it seem like there wasn't enough reliable evidence. However, a breakthrough in the investigation came when detectives discovered that the exterior surveillance cameras installed outside the building had recorded footage from the night of the incident. On the footage, Linda could be seen entering the gym at around 10 p.m., followed shortly by Sarah and half an hour later, Susan. There were no internal cameras in the gym, which complicated the case, but the footage from the exterior cameras revealed that all three women had been in the gym that night. This significantly complicated the picture for the detectives. Each of them could have been involved in Jim's death. The video became a crucial piece of evidence that added tension to the investigation. The detectives summoned Linda, Sarah, and Susan for questioning to clarify their whereabouts that night. Linda was called in first. She entered the investigator's office confidently, sure that her secret would remain hidden. The investigator, having reviewed the surveillance footage, decided to use a trick. He told Linda that they had footage from an internal camera in the gym that clearly showed her delivering the fatal blow to Jim. Upon hearing this, Linda faltered. She didn't know that there were no cameras inside, and her confidence immediately wavered. Her breathing quickened and her face paled. Realizing she was cornered, Linda became nervous and, unable to withstand the pressure, finally confessed. She described how she had struck Jim in a fit of rage and had then called Sarah to help her cover up the crime. Linda's confession not only revealed the details of the murder, but also implicated Sarah. Linda gave a full account of how Sarah had helped her clean up the scene, hide the dumbbell. After Linda's confession, the police promptly arrested both her and Sarah. Both women were charged with Jim's murder and the cover-up. The investigators presented undeniable evidence, including the surveillance footage, Linda's confession, and the results of the forensic examination. Susan was also questioned, but was quickly cleared of suspicion, as investigators determined that she had arrived at the gym after Jim's death and was merely a shocked witness. The trial of Linda and Sarah began in January 2015 and drew significant public attention. The press covered every session, and many were shocked that two elderly women were involved in such a brutal crime. Linda, who had confessed to the murder, was convicted of manslaughter. In court, she testified that she hadn't intended to kill Jim, but had struck him in a moment of intense emotional stress. The court took her testimony into account and ruled that it was a crime of passion, but Linda couldn't escape punishment. She was sentenced to 20 years in prison. Sarah, found guilty of helping to cover up the crime, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her role in helping Linda hide the murder weapon and attempting to frame Susan did not go unpunished, even though she hadn't been directly involved in the murder. The tragic death of Jim became a stark reminder that casual relationships and deceitful manipulation can lead to catastrophic consequences. Jim, who had enjoyed his power over three women, hadn't realized that his actions were turning into a deadly game. He had sought pleasure and light relationships without considering the feelings of those involved. Linda and Sarah, who had sought solace and support from the young trainer, fell into the trap of their own emotions. Their relationships with Jim became sources of jealousy, resentment, and betrayal, ultimately leading to a tragic conclusion. This story highlights the importance of honesty in relationships and understanding the consequences of one's actions. Lies, manipulation, and deceit can destroy not only the lives of those involved in such relationships, but also the people around them. Unfortunately, Jim underestimated how strong the emotions of those he played with could be, leading to his death. It also served as a lesson for Linda and Sarah. Never let emotions dictate your actions, especially when lives are at stake. Their stories became a cautionary tale about how casual romances can lead to unexpected and often tragic outcomes.